We're doing it.
I like to wait for the song to finish before
The whole thing. We got to hear the whole fade out.
Yeah, all of it.
What are we fading for? We should just be having a hard stop at the very end.
I mean, we could cold open, which, there is some benefit to a cold open as well.
There are benefits to that. I don't know what's better.
I
Put it in the comments.
like
you like the song? I don't give a shit.
The song is nice.
I don't
the
care
song
either way.
it's good. It gives a little context around. I don't know. It's a fine song.
All right.
It's the best you can do for free radio, I'm sure.
That's true. It is royalty free, which is nice.
Yeah.
Alex is back, baby. Finally.
Yeah.
Two weeks in a row, right?
Yeah, we were here last week. Yeah, we made this work.
When was the last time we did 2 weeks in a row? It's got to have been 11 years.
It's been a while. Yeah, it's been quite some time. So yeah, it's nice to be back. It's a slow week. I mean, there's really, now that baseball's over, it's, I get people who really like football. You get immersed in football season. The difference with baseball is it's every single day. So there's always something to talk about. With football, it's just you're just rehashing the same topics over and over and over again for an entire week straight until the next game happens. So for me, this is just like from a sports talk standpoint, this is the absolute worst time of year. I get that some people love football, and I would imagine in like the sports radio industry, this is actually the best time of year because football does usually move the needle the most. But man, I just can't hear people talk X's and O's and break down what happened in a game for 6 consecutive days. Like it does absolutely nothing for me. So I miss baseball season. This is where I really miss that we don't have an NBA team, because obviously once NBA gets going, you have something to talk about on a nightly basis as well. College kind of fills that void a little bit, but you're only playing 2 games a week in college, so it's kind of somewhat similar to football. So yeah, it's a tough time of year for me.
Our topic list, but the Karl Anthony Towns got traded to the Knicks. It's struggling already, isn't it?
It's really bad.
Start the podcast.
Yeah, your internet's bad. You got to close those extra tabs. Just close the extra tabs. Stay here and close those extra tabs.
Take the porn off the screen. And
there you go.
I wanted to have no transition between when we got off the podcast and when I started watching porn. But fine, Alex. I guess I'll reload all those tabs. Maybe it's better now. I don't know. Yeah, I was actually literally just thinking about how I could improve the Wi-Fi in this room, and then here we are. Also, by the way, my voice is on its way out. I don't know if you could tell from the scratchy. I mean, to some degree, it's probably on its way out because of the Wi-Fi, but it's it's falling apart over here. Luckily, I've got a break from like a heavy comedy schedule for a while, so that'll be nice. But did you happen to? I know you don't listen to the podcast when you're not on it, which I respect. I had a harrowing return from Milwaukee or from Wisconsin.
I saw you post something about this, but I only vaguely recall what happened. I did not exactly see everything.
I hit a raccoon with my rental car, and rental cars, or at least the Honda Accord, at least the one I was driving, have a sensor in them when there's a collision that shuts the whole car down. I could no longer drive it. It was barely any damage, but I pull it off to the side and actually owe them a call back right now. But luckily I left very early. I left with enough time that I was like, oh man, this fucking internet thing. I wish at least the icon wasn't here because it's bugging me that it's here and I could tell when there's problems.
Oh, it's fine.
Now.
You're fine right now.
Yeah. I left with enough time that I managed to, on accident, get there on time. Like everything had to align to have it go wrong, and then everything had to align to bring us back to the promised land where I got home on my actual flight. I didn't have to wait in Milwaukee for 8 extra hours. And that is just like, I'm exhausted still. I haven't slept enough to recover from that. My voice has been fucked. The whole situation has been ruined by this Milwaukee or the trip.
Yeah, I am familiar with the rental car process in an accident after last November. For people who are ardent listeners of this podcast, I think we briefly recapped it when it happened, but we blew a tire on a North Carolina road last year. And it was at like 10 o'clock at night after a flight, which is the absolute worst time to get stranded on a highway you're unfamiliar with. But
I'd argue 3:30 in the morning on your way to a flight is a worse time.
That's equally bad. Yeah, we had a
Yeah.
baby in the car, so like if it was just me,
that
like
makes it worse for sure.
yeah, it definitely there's a lot of levels of bad in this situation. But the one thing I will say, I think everyone, if you've ever been in a rental car in that situation where you get stranded on the side of the road, you feel pretty helpless. There's not a lot of recourse. You know, if you're in your own car, you're like, okay, I'll just call AAA or whatever. But when you're in a place you're unfamiliar with in a rental car, they have this entire process they make you go through, which generally you're gonna, and I think you had to do this, right? You had to get picked up by like a patrolman and then taken to a place where you could Uber. They all have the same policy. It's like, you're not in a safe place, so we need to have a patrolman of all people come get you and take you to what we deem a safe place so you can get an Uber. Like, rental car companies, I get it, man. Capitalism, they're not going to do this, but it would be nice if you had people in like major metro areas that would go out and just get you. You know, if they could be responsible for that sort of thing and then take you to an Uber or take you wherever you need to go. But again, capitalism is not going to allow, you know, any rental car company to do that sort of thing. It's a terrible process, though.
Yeah. I mean, it's the part of the deal is then they'd have to build it into the rental price, and now it's $7,000 to rent a car. It's the whole thing sucked. You know, it was also the first time in a long time I haven't gotten the insurance because I was like, I never use it. I'm just throwing money down the drain. And I do have like my own car insurance, a credit card that covers me, I think. So we're going to find out. We're going to find out how I am. But boy, what a stressful process. But so Karl Anthony Towns gets traded to the Knicks. He's a guy that's interesting. He's a guy that I like essentially a 7-footer who can shoot threes, is a player that I want on my team. And I feel like throughout his career, the amount I've been aware of him, he's been called soft. He's like built like a traditional big, but not like a modern big, and then has some of the elements. He seems like maybe like a generational mismatch with the NBA. And though he's put up numbers, I think they've been kind of discounted by this perception that they're soft and weak. I was surprised to see, I guess I would say, especially because finding out that Anthony Edwards really liked playing with him, I was surprised to see that trade. Did that trade surprise you at all?
No.
Okay.
The NBA trades never surprise me. It's the NBA. It seems like there is no loyalty in the NBA. Like, if all sports have, I guess, an eroding degree of loyalty, you know, it's not 20 or 30 years ago where guys would play their whole career with a team. I think the NBA is at the top of that list. So, and then I think to put it in a Seattle centric point of view, assuming we do get an NBA team back soon, as you know, has been rumored forever, basically, I think that'll be one of the biggest changes from the NBA that Sonics fans remember from when the Sonics were still here versus the NBA today, is that you do not really get attached to players the way that you did back then. You know, even when the Sonics were here, it's like you kind of had this seamless transition in a way from like the Kemp and Payton years. And I get that Kemp left earlier, but you kind of think of the Kemp and Payton era as like its own standalone thing. And Payton kind of carried the torch at the end of that era. And then you seamlessly transition to this Rashard Lewis, Ray Allen era once they make that acquisition by trading Payton for Allen. And I think because of that, the entire life of the Sonics franchise as it existed for those 40 some years was, you know, you had star players, or at least perceived star players here, that you gravitated towards, that really became the face of the franchise. The modern NBA, I don't think that's how it works as much anymore, especially with like the advent of super teams and guys bouncing all over the place. It's like, it's not surprising anymore when you see a superstar traded in the NBA.
Is Karl Anthony Towns a superstar?
I mean, he's been in movies. I feel like when it comes to NBA players or NFL players, I would say it's like baseball doesn't count because they do such a bad job marketing their players. No one would ever want them in a movie. But with NBA and NFL, if you've been in a movie, you are about as close to a superstar as you can get, whether your numbers back it up or not. That's just the reality. It's like the movie Draft Day. Arian Foster is like one of the stars of the movie Draft Day. Arian Foster, at the time he started in this movie, was basically done with his NFL career. But like, there's probably people that know Arian Foster just because of acting. You know, there's probably some out there that do. So I feel like, if you've been in movies, you're probably as close to a superstar as you possibly can be in the NBA or the NFL.
I guess I assumed, knowing you, I maybe shouldn't have, but I assumed that by superstar you were talking about on the court, not
No. No, the NBA has become it's a league of cultural relevance more than it is like playing relevance. I feel like yeah, every league is so different now. Every pro league. I mean, I feel like NBA and NFL are more closely aligned than MLB and any of the other sports leagues that are out there. But with NBA, it's so much more about cultural relevance. It's about your shoe deal or your fashion line or, you know, how people perceive you on social media or in entertainment. There's so much of that I think really takes precedence over actual output, over numbers. And I get it, man. There are some basketball purists out there that will always, you know, hold. I always see, you know, little diagrams that compare the number of championships LeBron has to all the greats, right? And how he's not as much of a great as a result. But I mean, you think about guys like, you know, a guy like Charles Barkley is one of the most recognizable figures in basketball. And he never won a championship when he played. And he hasn't played for nearly 30 years. So it's like the entertainment aspect of the NBA to me takes precedence over what actually gets produced on the court. And people will deny that, but the reality is we've put a priority on the entertainment aspect. And, you know, of course, with basketball versus any of those other sports, you have so much more visibility because of the fact that you're not wearing a helmet and wearing gear like you would in football. And, you know, baseball, you have visibility, but
yeah,
the league doesn't market you. So how much visibility do you really have?
I want to make 2 Seattle sports podcast recommendations real quick. Dave Sims has a podcast. Are you aware of this podcast?
The one with Krzyzewski that he's done for years?
No, it's called Hey Now with his 2 sons.
Okay. Cool.
He just started it with his 2 sons. He did a really good episode of it many months ago, or a couple weeks ago anyway, with Bill Burr. Was pretty cool. But he just had Griffey on. Great conversation with Ken Griffey Jr. And it's cool because obviously, like Dave Sims was like a pretty good high school athlete, it sounds like. And his kids were decent high school athletes. And so they have like a very like parallel relationship to the senior junior relationship, even though obviously at a much lower level of sports.
Yeah.
Which that was great. And also, by the way, if Griffey did the Pivot podcast with Ryan Clark and Channing. Oh my God, I want to call him Channing Frye. Channing, what's the dude's name?
What,
Not Channing Frye was like an Arizona. No, he played for fucking like Jacksonville maybe or Miami as a
Channing Crowder.
Channing Crowder, Jesus Christ, and Fred Taylor. Great podcast. They had Griffey on a year or 2 ago, and it was great. And then my other recommendation is the Get Got podcast with Marshawn Lynch, Michael Robinson. The podcast, I think it's probably about 5 years late, frankly. They had John Randall on today, who is not a guy who I think you think of in the pantheon of Seattle athletes. Maybe the best episode they've ever done, frankly.
Interesting. Yeah, I just don't listen to sports podcasts.
I'm not recommending to you, motherfucker. I know you.
I understand. I get that you're recommending it to these people that are listening to us, I guess. But yeah, it's not when I'm not talking to you or watching sports, I just don't care. I'm probably the worst advocate for these, you know, any type of media. I worked in sports media and I'm like anti-sports media now. I support the people that do it, but I don't care to listen to what people have to say. As long as Sims isn't tracking a fly ball, I could see his podcast being very good.
Man, I love Sims, and we're going to disagree so much when he's gone, when he probably takes the Yankees radio job. I don't think that's been filled yet, right? It's like
no, it hasn't. People keep talking about him going there. Here's the thing. I really like Sims personality-wise. I think he's like a really good personality. And when he first came on board in Seattle, I was excited for him being here because I'd heard him call a lot of basketball and football on Westwood One. And granted, this was 15 years ago now, so it's been a while. But he was really good. I mean, for a while, if you remember the UFL, the original UFL, one of the NFL or one of the mini pro football offshoots, he was the voice of the UFL in like 2008 or 2009, like the years before he came to Seattle. And he was really good calling those football games. He did a lot of college basketball, and he was great calling college basketball. And then when he got to the Mariners as a baseball announcer, I know he always said that baseball was like his love. That's what he wanted to call. He really wanted a job like that. You know, baseball is so nuanced because you have to fill the time with interesting stories. You have to. Like, there's just so much downtime, especially for a team like the Mariners, who will give you a lot of downtime. Let's be honest.
Yeah.
And you know, when you're a new guy in town, obviously you're going to have to draw on your own personal experiences rather than team relevant experiences. And now we're at a point, obviously he's been with the Mariners long enough. He can draw on things that have happened in the past with this team. But just from a storytelling perspective on baseball broadcasts, he hasn't been the best, at least for me. And I get it. For some people, I think when they isolate his calls, like when he has like a big moment to call, he knocks it out of the park. I think from a big moment perspective, the guy is as good as it gets. And I think part of the reason he's so good at that is because he's made so many of those big calls doing basketball and doing football in the past. With basketball and football, you don't ever have to fill the time with anything interesting to say.
Sure.
You're calling action start to finish, more or less. But with baseball, you have to be able to fill those gaps. And I think that's where it's just, you know, I've told this story before, but I heard one of the weirdest story I've ever heard him tell on a broadcast was with Mike Blowers, and him and Blowers have a dynamic that they don't really get along so well. I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm sure most people can pick up on that on the broadcast. And I think if you asked either one of them, they'd probably say they get along great, but the reality is they don't. And the story he was telling, Logan Morrison was up to bat. And
Logan Morrison.
Yeah, and he's telling Blowers. I don't know. People, if you know their relationship and you know that they don't get along like super, super great, then you really pick up on the nuances when they're talking to each other in the booth. And if you've never picked up on this before, a lot of times when Sims tells a story, he will be met with absolute silence from Blowers, which is pretty damning. Like, from a broadcasting perspective, Blowers hangs him out to dry a lot. And honestly, it makes Blowers seem like a worse broadcaster at the same time. Like, he's doing Sims no favors. And I think that's kind of a silly way to operate. Like, even if you don't get along with your broadcast partner, like, just be a professional, right? Like, be a professional and help him out where you can. But this was one of those stories where he left him to hang out to dry. And Sims is talking about how he's in the locker room earlier that day. And he goes up to Logan Morrison and he goes, "Hey, Logan, anybody ever call you Marion?" And Logan's like, in his mind, probably thinking like, what the fuck is this guy talking about? And he's just like, no one's ever called me that. And Blowers says, you know, at this point, Sims pauses, waiting for the Blowers reaction, and Blowers is dead silent. So Sims just has to continue on with this story that's going nowhere. And he's like, you know, because Marion Morrison, that's John Wayne's real name. It's Marion Morrison. And it's like, first of all, how is Logan Morrison going to know that? Like,
right.
That's a factoid nobody freaking knows. It's completely dated and irrelevant. No one in today's world would probably know that at all or care. And Blowers certainly didn't know or care. And again, he just left him to hang out to dry. He just left this like awkward silence there after this story was told. And it's like, that is the type of dynamic you're dealing with these two. And it's just one of those funny things, man.
Well, we've talked about it a little bit off the podcast, but I'm all about replacing Blowers with just about anybody. When he was gone and Angie Mentink filled in, I thought she was better. I think that you're after the wrong culprit on that. Like, there's, to a degree, you gotta play a little bit of you gotta do a little bit of better improv, a little more yes-handing on that to me. But
yeah, I would agree. I think Blowers has not been the best color guy. He just hasn't. I mean, he's been doing this for a long time. When he first started, he seemed to have like a passion for it.
Sure.
And it seems like whether it's because of his, like, if you notice when he's paired with Goldsmith, he is lively and interactive. And I think just being paired with Sims, who's a guy that for whatever reason he doesn't vibe with, I think that just takes a lot of the passion out of it for him, whether he would admit that or not. But you have to be a pro. I mean, that's kind of the reality of a job like this. You have to be a pro, even if you don't want to. And
Yeah.
I
Well,
agree with
that's
you.
what
Andrew's great.
I think.
Andrew's really great.
Dave Sims is the most professional broadcaster. I mean, obviously, he had big shoes to fill and had to come here. And when Dave Niehaus passed away, and I think he's been unfairly compared to Niehaus. Niehaus is obviously like, maybe first year broadcaster, like from the time the team was founded or very early in the team's history, and then was there forever, like was part of the Seattle franchise. Where Sims is like a hired gun, which I don't mind that. I think he's incredible on those other sports. I agree with you on that. Like, should be in whatever broadcast Hall of Fame there is. I think he's great on the baseball. I really enjoy it. I'll be sad to see him go. But I know there's a segment, and I actually think it's interesting you say that the moments are where he succeeds, because every criticism I've heard of him is that he fails in big moments, and I don't agree with that. He's got some high profile, like he stumbles on his words, and those things become memes in Seattle. But
yeah,
I think overall he's very good.
The two biggest critiques I would have of Sims, one, he does this like fake Italian tough guy accent all the time. Have you ever noticed that? It's very.
Well, it's like, but do you think it's like he does it? Say it again.
It's like his inner monologue is coming out. Like it's like how sometimes like you're just sitting around at home and you're like imagining a conversation with somebody or something, and you like would like your inner monologue would say it. His inner monologue happens to be like a character from Goodfellas.
Sure, I mean he grew up on the East Coast.
Yeah,
right?
I get it. I totally understand. Like the history of where he's from and where he grew up, it totally makes sense that this would be his inner monologue. But the fact that he brings it to the broadcast is like, you could either see it as like endearing or like kind of unintentionally hilarious, and I see it as unintentionally hilarious, and to me it detracts from his style. Like his style is his professional style of calling a game is one thing, and then when you have like these little asides where inner Dave comes out, it's it's so funny because he doesn't realize he's talking like Joe Pesci, but he is. So that to me is
I don't mind it. I don't mind it. I also think it's fully authentic. So
yeah, some people would find it very endearing. So that's one thing. The other thing is I think he gets a little too amped to call a big moment that doesn't necessarily materialize, right? Like it'll be a big situation and a dude will hit like a fly ball, like a routine fly ball to the outfield, and off the bat he'll call it like it's gone, right? So like if you're sitting around at home, you might not be paying attention to the game, but when you hear the yell, when you hear a broadcaster yell, you immediately look up to the TV, and he does that a lot in situations that don't generate what you'd expect the outcome to be, right? So I think those are two things where it's like we get it. Like
I want to say two things about that, because one, Dave Niehaus was pretty notorious for that at the end of his broadcasting career. I want to ask you this. I want to quiz you very quickly. How old is Dave Sims? Guess, don't look it up.
I think he's probably got to be like early to mid 70s, like 74 maybe.
Okay, he's 70 years old. He's 71 years old. Niehaus 74 when he passed away. That's my point. Is like Niehaus probably lost a step. Sims might have lost a step. I still think he's very good. I'm glad he's been in Seattle. I hope he gets the New York radio job, but I want to see him also stay here. Can we do both? Can he call both? Do a remote in.
I always find this funny. This year, and I think maybe last year too, Dave Valley is a broadcaster for both the Mariners and the Rangers. Did you know that? Isn't that weird?
No, I didn't know he was with the Rangers.
He literally goes back and forth. So like he'll go be their Blowers, right, for the Rangers games. Like he doesn't really call too many games for the Mariners. It's what he does for the Mariners is pretty much just studio analysis in the Root Studios.
Sure.
So when he's not doing that, like you'll see him on occasion doing studio analysis, but most of the time he's doing color commentary for the Rangers game. So it's just a weird dynamic. And then in between, he's doing like MLB Network stuff. So this guy goes from like the MLB Network studios to Rangers games to Mariners games. He's like got this triangle around the country that he just bounces around to. And more power to him because you got to collect those paychecks. But it's just a funny thing that you can work for both teams. I guess it probably gives him an interesting insight that maybe other analysts wouldn't have.
We got to move on from this because I have a somewhat of a schedule to work on. I'm going to pull up these comments real quick. Tyson Damos to be a superstar, you have to be the best player on your team. Karl Anthony Towns was not on the T-Wolves. Debatable he is on the Knicks. I don't think he's better than Brunson. Yeah, that's what I was asking is he a superstar in the sense that, like, is he a franchise-altering piece? And maybe he's not. So I don't know. To me, it's like it was an odd trade because Anthony Edwards is the superstar there, and he seems to like him. He doesn't seem. Maybe it's some shit you say when a guy gets traded away because you asked for it, but he seems to not be happy with the trade. And I would think in the NBA, the number one superstar on your team is who you cater to.
Well, if you're the Timberwolves, acquiring Julius Randle is risky. Because Julius Randle is used to being the alpha. He's not a great alpha, but he's been an alpha. And I get it. He learned to play alongside Jalen Brunson last year. So, he's in a way been prepped to take a back seat to a superstar. But yeah, it's going to be an interesting dynamic because we know Anthony Edwards is the man. And Julius Randle is going to have to be really taking a backseat now. I mean, Brunson is a point guard. So it's like, even if he is the star, he still has to be deferent to some degree.
Yeah.
With Anthony Edwards, that's the guy. I mean, that's like going and playing alongside, a Kobe type. I'm not saying he's that level, but like, that's the type of personality you're going.
He seems to me like the guy who's next in line to take over the league once, like the end of the class really is like LeBron and Kevin Durant. And then you're to that next group, the Giannis's and the Anthony Edwards and the next group of guys. And he seems like he's, maybe the youngest of that group. Okay. Oh, the last one I'll give you Tyson also. I don't want to penalize people for commenting because we like the comments. They keep they break up the show a little bit. The Goldsmith Blowers dynamic is funny to me though. Yeah, I mean I get that. And Goldsmith's great to me. I will say when he first came to Seattle, I thought he was like a little bit of a cheesy newscaster, and I'm coming around. So he's better
developed.
Too.
Yeah, he's developed. I mean, I think there is the love fest for Aaron Goldsmith was premature. There was a lot of people that, like, the moment he just said the first words he ever said as a Mariners broadcaster into the mic, there were people who are like, this guy's the best broadcaster I've ever heard. It's like, he doesn't even have any stories yet. Just like, give him some time.
Yeah, he's 11 years old. Give the man some time.
Yeah, but he's gotten a lot better over the years for sure.
So I'm gonna skip some of these topics that I have written down. I don't know if you looked at the doc. I do want to get into so we've seen a lot of Seahawks and Huskies games now. Four Seahawks games, 5 Huskies games. I can't remember if we predicted the Huskies record. I know we predicted the Seahawks record. I want to revise those based on what we know now. Based because we've now seen, obviously, I think we've seen the good and the bad from the Huskies. I think I'm less optimistic, I feel like, than the fan base overall after the Rutgers loss. And the Seahawks are kind of exactly what I thought they would be. Although I will say, like, Geno really seems to be taking to Ryan Grubb's offense the way that maybe the most optimistic people thought he would. And I'm very encouraged by that. And I'm like, I guess I'm like, if I was giving him a grade for the Huskies, it's like an A on defense, incomplete on offense. And it's the inverse for the Seahawks, right? It's like A on offense, incomplete on defense. And I wouldn't revise I think the Huskies might be like a 6 or 7 win team when it's all said and done.
Yeah. First with the Huskies, I think this coming weekend will be a big test for them. I mean, I know it's interesting because when the betting lines came out last week, the Huskies were favored over Michigan. I think a lot of that has to just do with the fact that Michigan's coming out all the way. This is their first time coming out this far to the West Coast, which we know from what the Huskies did last week going to New Jersey for Rutgers. The travel in the Big Ten, I think over time it'll become more routine for a lot of teams. But the first time you have to do these big trips, there is a toll. There's a real toll on these guys. And so until that all gets figured out, I can understand why the Huskies would be favored over Michigan. They're going to, they announced a sellout already, so it should be a pretty ruckus crowd that's going to be loud. I mean, I don't know that Michigan, I think a lot of the teams from other parts of the country don't really understand what Washington is like until they get here when it's a sold out stadium. But it's the construction of that stadium is similar to the Seahawks stadium, where noise really kind of filters down onto the field. And it's very, very loud for an opposing player, more so than a lot of these guys are prepared for. And so I think, if Washington holds up what the bettors think they're going to do and can actually win this game, we don't need to talk about whether they actually cover the spread, but if they at least win the game, then they're able to kind of right their ship and build a lot of momentum and a lot of respect. I mean, I think beating Michigan, it doesn't really matter how good Michigan is. Beating them when you're in the Big Ten, it means something. So it's going to be a big test for them. They got to actually pull that off. But I agree. I think I would take one win off their ledger now. If I said they were an 8-win team before, I'd say they're probably like a 7-win team now. And if they lose this weekend, then you really have to start thinking about how they're going to be fighting for their lives just to get into a bowl. So
yeah,
there's a lot to build off of there. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, if you look at the schedule after this, you got Iowa on the road, which feels like I don't think they're going to be favored in it, certainly. And it seems like a pretty good chance it's going to be a loss. Ranked Indiana team, which I think at the beginning of the season, you probably didn't expect that to be as big of a challenge. That's in Indiana. And then USC at home, Penn State on the road. I mean, you could be looking at the Seahawks or the Huskies reeling off 6 straight losses. By the time.
Yeah. No, it's true. I mean, and the thing that really that had me down about the Huskies before the season started is that the one thing about most of these Big Ten teams is that they're all really strong in the trenches. Right. A lot of them lack skill at skill positions. They might not have the best quarterbacks. They might not have the best receivers. But what they all do really well is they're strong in the trenches, and they usually have a pretty good running game, and they usually have a pretty solid defense. And unfortunately for the Huskies this year, their weakness is in the trenches. Right. So it's like the league strength and the Huskies' weakness they converge in such a way that it's going to make it an uphill battle for Washington all season long. And, if you can't get past Rutgers, who's probably one of the weaker teams in that regard in the trenches, then it's going to be tough against some of these more perennial powers in the Big Ten. So this is going to be a real big test. We already know, I get that both these teams are quite a bit different than they were in the championship last year when they met, but what you saw in the championship last year still holds. Michigan just ran the ball down Washington's throat. They used their lines to overpower Washington, and that's probably what they're going to try to do again. So if the Huskies can hold up on the offensive and defensive lines, then they really do have a chance to win this game. And if they can do that, I think that's one of those confidence boosters that you can then carry into some of these even tougher matchups that you're going to encounter over the next few weeks. But if you lose this one, you're already dealing with kind of a thin O&D line. And then you get down on yourselves a little bit after you lose a big home matchup. That's where you run the risk of things kind of spiraling. So this is it feels like this is the breaking point.
Yeah. To me, if you lose to Michigan, I almost think that takes, obviously ignore the Michigan game. I think it takes like 2 additional games off of my win total projection. Like I think the USC game becomes like a pretty heavy USC favorite, maybe more than it would be anyway. And even I think you start to look at the UCLA game because the Oregon game looks really tough. I agree. I think I went from optimistic they could be an 8-win team to, if I had to bet today, I'm like a coin flip if they're in a bowl or not.
Yeah, it's going to be, I think it's going to come down to the wire. And then what are you talking about? You're talking about the Independence Bowl in Shreveport. Sure. It's going to be shitty. It's going to be a shitty bowl. I know everyone's been hoping that they'll get the Las Vegas Bowl. That's kind of the best of where, they could possibly align. And for fans, you'd still go to a Las Vegas Bowl.
Sure.
If you're in the Independence Bowl in Shreveport, Louisiana in the wintertime, I don't think you're going to get a lot of fans out there. So there is this really does feel like the tipping point with the Seahawks. Really quick. I don't know if you've seen those graphics, but a lot of Bears fans and Bears media have been posting about this, but the route dynamics under Shane Waldron as offensive coordinator versus the route dynamics under really any other OC are, if you just see the diagram of how receivers run routes in Shane Waldron's offense, it's wild. It's 3 different squiggles on this chart. And then you look at any other offensive coordinator's diagram, and there's like 100 different lines going all different directions because of just the creativity of most OC's offenses versus how limited Shane Waldron is. The point of that being, I mean, Shane Waldron is getting dogged in Chicago right now, but we know that Gino has played the last few years in Shane Waldron's offense. And to be honest, he's looked pretty respectable under what I think can now safely say was a pretty primitive offensive scheme. It doesn't look like the offensive scheme. If what he's running in Chicago is similar to what he was running in Seattle, there was not a whole lot there, and Gino was maximizing it with the tools he had. Now, in Chicago, you might be able to get away with just like very simple route concepts when you have DK Metcalf and you have Tyler Lockett and even Jackson Smith and Jigba last year. You're not going to get away with that with a bunch of rookies and like kind of, I guess veterans who maybe haven't proven a whole lot in the league the way that they have in Chicago. But
I mean, they have Keenan Allen and DJ Moore. Like,
yeah, I guess Keenan's proven a lot, but he's at the end of the line. I mean, this is
that's fine.
Late stage Keenan Allen, and then you've got like a bunch of rookies. So that makes it tough. You might not be able to get away with it as much as you would in Seattle. But Gino looks pretty good in that offense the past few years. And I think the reason we're seeing this development this year is because of Ryan Grove's offense that really gives him a lot more opportunity to make plays. But even beyond that, I mean, just Gino's presence in the pocket, that I've never seen anyone rave over a loss the way people have been raving over the Seahawks Monday Night Football loss to Detroit the other day. People were raving about it, and a lot of it was because of Gino and the plays he was making. The fact that he was able to avoid a whole lot of pressure, the fact that he was willing to hang in the pocket and make big throws, big plays, escape when he needed to, but never really looked panicked, even though the situation around him was often chaotic. That's an evolution that you can't really teach. I mean, no matter what kind of scheme you have, or what kind of coordinator you have, what kind of plays are being drawn up, the ability to be that poised under the circumstances that Gino was facing, that's personal evolution that you see great quarterbacks make. Not good quarterbacks, but great quarterbacks. And it looks like that's where Gino is going at this point in his career, which is great.
He threw the ball 56 times.
It's a lot.
It's a lot of times. And one of the things that I like about Ryan Grubb and what I expect to see out of Ryan Grubb as he progresses is not going like, well, it's still early in the game, so still run the ball. Don't abandon the game plan now. They seem to react pretty quickly and go, fuck, this is going to be a shootout. I mean, literally, Jared Goff doesn't throw an incomplete pass.
Yeah,
they run all over the Seahawks in the first half. Like, they abandoned the game plan pretty quickly, and I appreciated that because they didn't wait till halftime to make adjustments. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, the interesting thing, Jared Goff was 18 for 18. So he throws 18 passes where Gino throws 56. That's a tremendous imbalance, but it just speaks to how the Lions running game was, dominant over the Seahawks defense. And that's just the reality that you'll face in some games. I know one thing we know about Ryan Grubb from the last couple of years at Washington is he very heavily favors the pass. I mean, he wasn't so imbalanced that it created problems. Obviously, they had a great offense both of his years at Washington. Usually, it seemed like watching games last year, especially when they had Dylan Johnson back there running the ball, they used the pass to set up the run, where a lot of teams, or especially the Seahawks under Pete Carroll, use the run to set up the pass, which traditionally is kind of the way you do things anyway. But with Grubb, it feels like, when you see the Seahawks run the ball now, when you see Kenneth Walker take a handoff or Charbonnet when Walker was out, they're more explosive plays. When you use the pass to set up the run, it seems like the runs are more explosive than they otherwise would be. They're not as predictable. And that's nice to see. So, I mean, I think the one thing he will probably have to get a little bit better at in the NFL is maybe maintaining a little bit more of a balance, because you can get away with that a little bit more in college, I feel like, especially when you got an elite quarterback like Michael Penix was. Not to say Gino doesn't have that potential, but just the NFL is a different beast, especially on defense and the way that, teams can adjust a lot quicker. So I think there will have to be a little bit more of a balance there, especially with two very good running backs. But ultimately, I've liked what I've seen on both sides of the ball. And I think, it looks like a playoff team at the very least. And we weren't sure about that in the offseason.
Yeah, I also have them at like plus 8,400 to win the world or win the Super Bowl, and like plus 3,700 to win the NFC. So please,
84 to 1 is about as long as their odds have been in the last, basically since Pete Carroll took over. So that's pretty good odds. Yeah.
My feeling was they were either going to be notably really bad or notably better than expected. Yeah. And luckily it's turned out to better than expected. All right, we're going to watch one video. I want to save some topics to talk to you specifically about the Geno Smith extension next week, theoretically, and off season. We have a lot of time to talk about it. I don't want to talk about it with anybody else. How bad was the internet there? Very bad.
I assume you said the Mariners off season, and then after that, I lost you. But yes, no, we do need to talk about the Mariner off season. But that's one of those topics that it can be really any time.
And my point was I'm monogamous to you on those two specific topics. I'll wait until you're on to talk about them. Okay, but let's watch this video of Rashee Rice's mom, who, by the way, Rashee Rice tore. Did he actually officially tear his ACL? I think he tore his ACL.
Not yet. They are the latest update on Rashee. See, I'm a Rashee Rice fantasy owner, so this is all bad news for me. But yeah, they are getting more testing done. They did put him on IR, but just for the 4 games. So they'll make a decision later on, it seems like.
Gotcha. Okay, so this is Rashee Rice's mom supposedly stealing a package. So it's a package. What you sent me, it's a who's that lady that it's a package of?
Chappell Roan. She's a singer.
Who the hell is that lady, by the way?
She's the Hot to Go. You've heard Hot to Go. I guarantee you've heard it. It's been
maybe I've heard Hot to Go. I'll listen to it on the drive to get my daughter from daycare.
It's a very popular song now.
Yeah, but dude, when would I listen to it? When would I hear this song?
I don't know. It's on TV commercials, but you don't watch, you probably don't see too many TV commercials.
Yeah, I watch everything I have is commercial free except for when I watch football. So
yeah.
Okay, so we're gonna watch Rashee Rice's mom, there's so many funny things about this.
She's in in what looks to be like an apartment complex or a townhome complex. Is that what we're dealing with here? Yeah.
It seems like it, yeah.
To be honest, I haven't watched the video yet. I've only read the articles. The best part about it is she's wearing a self-identifying jersey. It identifies her as Rashee Rice's mom.
Yeah,
and she gets caught stealing her neighbor's package on what I presume to be like a ring cam, just based on the fisheye.
Yeah, I think it's a ring cam. I think it is. I mean, it's so funny to be wearing the exact thing that incriminates you while you're
stealing a package. Yeah. Now I presume she was probably she was either coming back, I would have to assume, from the game or was watching the game somewhere. So we all know how football fans are after a game. She's probably had a few. Maybe she doesn't drink. I don't know. But I'm going to give her the benefit of the doubt. I'm going to say she's had a few. She happens to be walking down the hall towards her apartment, and she sees a package sitting there and decides she's going to steal it. And,
now, there's a charitable version of me that could say, attempt to give her the benefit of the doubt, where you go maybe her package got delivered to the wrong person. I've had in the early pandemic, I had an entire $300 load of Instacart groceries delivered to the wrong house. I've had many Amazon packages delivered to my neighbors. However, the way that she looked at, first off, the fact this video came out at all means that's not true. Nobody's putting this video out if she comes and picks her own package up off their front porch. Well, the way that she looks at the package and the way that she looks around essentially to see if anyone is watching, I think is a dead giveaway.
She moves, so she takes 2 passes at this apartment. And then the first pass, you can see her kind of I think she kicks or nudges the package out of the way to a point where I think she believes it's off camera, because you can't actually see the package. You can't see the package from the ring cam. It's not visible. It's too far down. So I think she moves it to a place where it looks like she is off camera, but what she doesn't realize is she's not. So as she bends down, not only as if you had any trouble identifying her just by face, when she bends down to pick up this package, you can see Mama Rice on the back of the jersey, which is just, this is straight out of America's Dumbest Criminals. If you remember that show from the 90s.
Yeah.
It's okay, if you were going to steal the package, well, that's one thing, but at least make sure you're not on camera, which you seem to know there was a camera there. So that's a problem. 2, if you're going to do it, don't be wearing something that personally identifies you. And then this is the part that's really crazy to me, is I was kind of diving into some of these articles. Apparently the person who had the package stolen. Now, if you know anything about Chappell Roan as a musician, I'm just going to go out on a limb here and say Mama Rice is probably not a Chappell Roan fan. It's probably not her style. So that's probably not something she even really wanted, which, you know, she was stealing it. She was taking a shot. Maybe it was something cool, or maybe it was something she could return. Who knows?
Is she like a Lady Gaga type? Is this what's happening?
She's like, she's in like the Olivia Rodrigo camp of like, that's her target market, like white suburban teen girls, you know, like
Gotcha.
that's kind of what she's going for. So anyway, probably not her style. Probably not.
Turns out that was also Pete Rose's target market. Rest in peace.
And then so the woman who had this package stolen, apparently she just went to Mama Rice and was like, hey, if you just give it back, we'll call it
no
good.
Problems.
Right. Which is like a hell of an offer. If you've been caught stealing something and somebody comes to you and says, hey, just give it back, we'll call it good. I worked retail for a number of years. There were many, many times where we would stop somebody and just say, hey, if you just give it back and you leave, good. Nobody has to get involved here beyond that. We're giving you one free pass.
Yeah.
And it's crazy. And most of the time when you catch somebody in the act and you give them the free pass, they take it because they're not idiots. They're not that big of an idiot. And Mama Rice did not do that. She decided, well, I don't have any package here. What are you talking about? And
I'm going down with the
ship. The cops involved. They had to get the cops involved. Now here we are. Bad week for the Rice family, man. The injury.
Yeah, the Rice family's being taken down by modern camera technology left and right. It's tough time to be and also the only thing that could slow Rashee Rice down was a potentially torn ACL. Okay, let's play the home run game.
Oh, we're playing the home run game one more time?
Let's do it. Well, let's play until I say we play till the end of the World Series.
All right.
That mainly because I need time to tally up the scores because we're probably relatively close this year.
I understand that the leg work is that's the hardest part of it, so yes. I will give you that. You go ahead and give me one first, and then at the same time, I will be trying to find a home run person for you.
Okay, so I have one.
I'm sure I will find one.
I have one that I'm worried we've already done, and this is the rare time where I'm not going to tell you to shut up. That we probably haven't already done it. Ryan Braun.
Yeah, I think we have done Ryan Braun.
Okay,
but I don't remember exactly what it is, so I'm willing to do it again.
Let's do. Here's one. How about we'll go another Jewish fella. How about Sean Green?
Okay, that's a good one. I don't think we've done Sean Green. Sean Green had some monster days. I think he had a 4 home run day in his career.
He had a 4 home run day that until the recent Shohei Ohtani day, I think was the most total bases a guy had. It was like 19 total bases or something like that in a game.
Okay. Yeah, that's a good. Yeah, he was a much better player than he got credit for. You know, he comes up in like I think it was originally a Blue Jay in like 91 or 92 and maybe like 92-ish. And then obviously his best years were spent with the Dodgers later on. I think he had a longer career than you might think too. So like he goes 92 and then man, he probably plays till like I want to say like 2008 or 2009-ish. Maybe even longer than that. He might have been pushing like a 20-year career. And I'm sure he probably didn't play a whole lot on the either ends of those. I think he kind of had a slow burn at the end. I might be wrong about that, but I think his last couple of years were not the best. But he had some really good years there in the middle. And he was like one of those guys that if you looked at him, he looked like a 20 home run guy, but he was probably closer to like a 40 home run guy most years. So I'll say his average was probably right around like 30 to 35 a year. And if he played for like, let's say 15 full years, 30 at 15 full years would be, I mean, that's 450. That's a lot. It's probably not that high. I'm just going to go for it. 390.
So some stuff was really. I mean, you're always good with the years they come up, and the team they came up with. He comes up with Toronto. He actually makes his debut. Plays 3 games in 1993. Plays 14 games in 94. And then plays his first like real time in 95. He's 5th in the Rookie of the Year voting, 15 home runs in 95. Bats 288, 326, 509. Pretty good for a rookie. Has what? 3 seasons with 40 plus home runs,
Okay.
but only 1 additional season with 30 plus home runs.
Ooh.
So he's in that range where you're like,
Ugh.
it's a lot of really big home run seasons and then a lot of not very big home run seasons. What does he play? He plays 15 total seasons. You were right. A little bit of the beginning was pretty slow. The end was I would say not quite as bad as maybe you thought, but it wasn't a bunch of home runs. There weren't a bunch of home runs. Sean Green, and just we'll cut to the chase for the sake of my voice. 328 home runs.
Okay. That's not as bad. I'm glad.
Not so bad.
I didn't stick with my original estimate of 450 or whatever I said.
Yeah,
but
27 was his 162 game average. So you were a little high.
yeah. The fact that he had those, because I distinctly remember the big seasons. He might have even
Yeah.
won an MVP. Did he? You might have said that a minute ago.
I didn't say it. He did not. He
Okay.
got MVP votes in 3 years though.
Yeah, because I distinctly remember the big home run seasons. the
Only
40
2
plus.
All-Star games, by the way.
Yeah, he was always one of those guys, especially in the 90s. I mean, this is another guy that just kind of lives in the shadow of the steroid era where, unless you were hitting 50 a year, you just weren't getting a lot of
Yeah.
love. So,
Well, and also
no,
if you heat up at the end of the year, the Major League Baseball All-Star games in the middle of the year.
yeah, exactly. If you're a second half player, I can see how that would be trouble. Okay. Not my worst day. Could have been better. I'm going to give you a guy today that everybody knows a lot about. I think it's going to be a tough one. Tony Gwynn.
Ooh, Tony Gwynn's a good one. First off, shout out to my buddy Josh Firestein, comedian. He has a great joke about he says he's talked about his friend who's breaking 3 commandments at once. And he's like, that's a 300 average. You're the Tony Gwynn of sin. And it's a joke that he believes in a lot, that I like a lot, that the crowds do not connect with
No.
on a regular basis. So it's one of those jokes that's like, and he's a big Padres fan. Man, Tony Gwynn. I'll bet you Tony Gwynn had like 1 season where he tried to hit for. I remember him saying at some point he was going to try to hit for power for a season. I bet he hit like 26 home runs and probably had a lot of single-digit home run seasons, but plays forever. I mean, plays for like 20-ish years, all in San Diego, which also isn't super conducive to home runs, especially if he's playing in Petco at the end of his career. Man, that's a tough one because he was around so long that he had to accumulate. I'm going to say 130 home runs.
Okay.
I watched your face change in a way that I haven't seen it change before, which is
All right.
upsetting.
Well, let me first.
This is the most torturous part of this podcast, by the way.
What
is when
What do you think his
between-
162 game average? What do you think that was? If you had to guess, and you
Fuck.
have to.
I mean, I'm not. I know that it goes against what I just said, but I would have said like 11, and now that puts him at like 200 plus
Okay.
home runs. So.
Okay. Yeah. So I think it's lower than most people would think. It's 9.
Okay.
It's single digits, but you were kind of on the right track with some of those power numbers, I guess. First of all, he does have a 20-year career, all in San Diego. Comes up in 82, plays until 2001, and 82 and 83, he basically plays sporadically. 2000 and 2001, same thing, plays pretty sporadically. But every other season in between is more or less a full season, because the thing about fat is it's tough to injure, and he's on the chunkier side.
He actually stole a lot of bases earlier in his career, right?
He did, yeah. In 87, he actually steals 56 bags.
Yeah.
I mean,
okay.
most people I think know this. This isn't some big secret, but he was also drafted into the NBA by the Clippers. I mean, he was a hell of a a hell of a college basketball player. So he was a point guard. So he was very athletic early on. Only the Tony Gwynn we remember and our, that we grew up with was always a chunkier guy. That was the Tony Gwynn we knew. But a lot of people remember him earlier on that, not being as big. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 times he hits double-digit home runs in his career. The high water mark for him is 97. He hits 17 home runs. So never quite gets to 20. That wasn't his game. This guy's just trying to put the ball in play, and he did it very well. You're right. I mean, he never plays in Petco. He only played in what died as Qualcomm Stadium, but is probably most fondly remembered as Jack Murphy, which, if I remember correctly, Jack Murphy in right field had a pretty big wall. So if you're a lefty, I guess if he's going oppo a lot, which he probably did, it's probably a little bit easier to go to left field, but right field was tough for left-handed hitters there, if I remember correctly. So never gets to Petco, but it's not like Qualcomm or Jack Murphy was a great hitter's park either. And, as time goes by, he manages, you said 130, I believe.
Yeah.
The number of home runs Tony Gwynn hits is 135.
Damn.
You did it.
Damn.
Right there. Yep.
Wow, that was pretty damn good.
Yeah, I figured that would be tougher than it was. I guess now looking at it, it's pretty low variance, and we all know what kind of hitter Tony Gwynn was. But even in spite of that, I mean, you stuck it as well as anyone stuck it. So.
Yeah, I will say my cousin, I have a cousin who was drafted or was at least scouted by the Padres, and who
that's like the type of family story that you're never sure about, because I'm sure if he was just scouted, the story has evolved into being, I was drafted by the Padres.
He was, my cousin also, by the way, was one of his best friends was Kevin Towers. I never met Kevin Towers. I'm not close to my cousin, but he scouted Colton Wong of all people because my cousin was a chef in Hawaii.
Yeah, you've told me this.
So, which thank you, Dan, for doing that. That really helped. Thanks for helping the Mariners by getting Colton Wong more status in Major League. No, yeah, I mean, and Tony Gwynn's a guy I will say, like, I've been aware of him a lot because he also died of cancer that he attributed to chewing tobacco. I used to chew a lot of tobacco, so I've thought about Tony Gwynn a lot. Maybe what's killing my voice right now is from chewing tobacco. We don't know. So
you and Tony Gwynn are like intertwined. I'm not going to say anything about the similarity in body type either.
All right. That's enough of that. Thank you, Casey McLean Comedy, Bickerson's Brewhouse, October 19th, and more to announce later.
Alex,
all right, fucking that. Alex really.
You don't have to follow me anywhere. You never.
All right, shut up. I hate this guy.